This just into CNN. Justice Clarence Thomas is now disclosing private jet trips and a vacation paid for by a Republican megadonor. According to newly released financial disclosure forms, Harlan Crow paid for private jet trips for Thomas in 2022 to attend a speech in Texas and a vacation at Crow's New York estate. CNN senior Supreme Court analyst Joan Biskupic has been following the details. So, Joan, walk us through what we're learning in this disclosure.
Sure. Morning, Boris. These are disclosures that Clarence Thomas was set to file in May, but he got a 90-day extension to make sure he completely followed up with the requirements of it. And overall, what this report shows, it reinforces the tight relationship between Clarence Thomas and, a very wealthy conservative benefactor who has helped him over the years. This is the first time that Clarence Thomas himself, after many, many years of travel with Harlan Crow, is actually disclosing it on the report. And as you say, there were 2 private jet trips to events in Dallas, Texas, and then another one to a place where he's vacationed with Harlan Crow many, many years up in the Adirondacks, a very expensive estate where Clarence Thomas has summered. These things were all first reported by ProPublica, but this is in a report in April that showed lots of really lavish travel that the justice had taken. But this is the first time he's actually putting it on the forms. And again, it takes place against the backdrop of new scrutiny of the Supreme Court justices, their lack of transparency and lack of a formal ethics code. Boris. And let me just tell you one other thing we got today, in addition to these reports that I want to add at this first part, Boris, is what Clarence Thomas's lawyer said about this filing. He said, "The attacks on Justice Thomas are nothing less than ridiculous and dangerous, and they set a terrible precedent for political blood sport through federal ethics filings." His lawyer said that Clarence Thomas has always tried to be upfront about what he had to file, and it's just that he now knows more about what he should file. And in actuality, Boris, there had been some confusion in the rules about personal hospitality of the kind that Harlan Crow had given Clarence Thomas, but many ethics experts say that private jet travel, yacht travel, which Clarence Thomas has also enjoyed with Harlan Crow, that should have always been reported, Boris.
Yeah, there was some disagreement over that, and it wasn't only Clarence Thomas that was under scrutiny. Judge Alito also was under focus as well.
He was too, and he had also gotten an extension, Boris, and submitted his filing today. Now, some of the controversy over Sam Alito from before, again arising from news reports from ProPublica, involved trips from more than a decade ago. None of those were listed on his report. What we got on the Sam Alito report was just a lot of extensive travel for speeches that he gave, including a very provocative speech that he had given in Rome right after the Dobbs decision that reversed Roe v. Wade. So a lot of this arises in that context also. And one other thing I would mention is that what Clarence Thomas himself put on his form about one of the private jet trips he took on Harlan Crow's dime, it came in May of 2022, just about a week after the Dobbs leak, the leak of the decision reversing Roe v. Wade. He said that he had been advised to start taking private travel rather than commercial because of safety concerns. Now, again, that's the first time he has put that in writing, and the first time we're seeing that assertion. We're not sure if all the justices are now suddenly taking more private travel than commercial because of those kinds of security concerns, Boris.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, security considerations, because as we know, polling has shown that popular opinion of the Supreme Court is near all-time lows. And on that point, Joan, you'd reported previously that Chief Justice John Roberts has been trying to get all the justices on the same page with a code of ethics, some kind of agreement to say this is okay, this is not okay, this is what we need to report, this is what we don't need to report. What's the status of that agreement?
You know, that's a great question, Boris, because there's so much more scrutiny on the justices, very justifiable scrutiny on the justices who decide the law of the land for all of us. And the chief has wanted unanimity, and he has just not been able to get that among his colleagues. And when they left for their recess in June, they were really deadlocked on it. And they're coming back at the end of September and early October, and it will be the first time that they're actually all in a room together. And I think no doubt this issue is going to come up. But for at this point, it's really a stalemate, and the Chief Justice has not been able to, through his usual powers of persuasion, to get them all on board. And we've seen that Justices Thomas and Alito, you know, who we just found the new reports from them today, Boris, they have been signaling that they think that they're already following the rules, that this scrutiny is politically motivated, as Clarence Thomas's lawyer said in his statement today, and that Justice Alito himself has said publicly too.
And Joan, if you can just hang with us for just a moment more, we want to welcome into the conversation CNN legal analyst and former White House ethics czar Norm Eisen. Norm, you know, this report coming out just a short time ago, I mean, what are your initial reactions to what we're learning?
Thanks for having me, Rahel, Boris. I think that the Thomas report and the Alito report, even more so, are too little too late. The Thomas does make a number of 2022 disclosures, and he discloses an older real estate transaction involving Harlan Crow. But there are many more trips, luxury travel, yacht trips, visits to Crow's properties, payment of a family member's tuition. Those are not disclosed in here. There's a footnote saying he's still working on it. Most ethics experts believe that those disclosures were required. There's a debate about it. Some of them, particularly the luxury private travel, I think were pretty clearly required to be disclosed years and years ago. So it points to, and then Alito has a much skimpier ethics report where he doesn't, for example, get into a luxury fishing trip he took years ago that has come under scrutiny. So it does speak to the issue that Boris was asking Joan about. How is it possible that we do not have a code of ethics that is binding upon the highest court in the land? I can tell you, when I was doing ethics in the Obama White House for the former president and his administration, not only would I have required anything like this to be disclosed, I wouldn't have allowed it in the first place. Harlan Crow has had a case with interest before the court, and he has ideological interests as a prominent conservative. So there is an ethics crisis at the court.
Norm, on the question of trying to enforce ethics within the Supreme Court, I spoke with Senator Mazie Hirono last month, who put forward a bill essentially saying that Congress could come up with ethics rules for the court. But in speaking to legal experts, there's a lot of disagreement. They essentially say that the Constitution doesn't allow for that kind of oversight to come from Congress over the judicial branch. What do you make of that?
Boris, I respectfully disagree with those individuals who feel that way. Congress has historically had extensive regulatory powers over the court. Congress constitutes, for example, the number of justices who can sit on the court. It's clearly within the constitutional structure. There's an existing ethics law that I believe is already on the books that applies to the court. No less an authority than liberal members of the court have said that they believe there's ethics authority here for regulation. Now, the conservative wing disagrees. And that is particularly the case with Justice Alito, who's been one of the most outspoken about this, even taking to the pages, very unusual, taking to the pages of the Wall Street Journal to defend his ethics. But he's in a he's in a public debate. So I think the better of the argument, it is constitutional.
Joan, let me bring you back into the conversation as someone who has covered the Supreme Court for quite some time. I mean, do you think the backlash, do you think the transparency that we're starting to see will actually start to create a difference or make a difference in terms of what we see moving forward?
I think some of the justices themselves hope that it does, because, you know, as I mentioned earlier to Boris, you know, they're divided. But the one way to get Congress off their back, and the one way to give the public more confidence, which is really what this is all about, as I keep stressing, this is our Supreme Court. The one way to get public more confidence and to have the Congress stand down is for them to adopt their own rules. Then you don't have any kind of tension between what can Congress do and what can Congress not. And I know that there are members of the 9 who want that. They just have not been able to get it. And I think they're starting to realize that this, you know, they don't like the word crisis. You know, crisis is a word that's overused, but it's certainly something that has provoked the public, and it has added to the overall loss of stature and esteem that this Supreme Court has. And I think that, again, some of them are taking that to heart. Some of them apparently are not.